Hey guys, welcome back to What the Fat. We have an incredible guest on today, someone who I've been wanting to get on for the longest time. That is my very good friend, Yemeni Mesa. And Yemeni has a crazy story. We talk from everything from like his past growing up in Colombia to his obsession with fitness, health, food, and everything in between. And that led him on this journey to work with some of the top nutrition companies, honestly, in the world. Everything from ice cream companies all the way up to Quest Nutrition, No Foods, and we even tease at a very new venture or the next chapter of what Yemeni's life has to offer. So I hope you guys enjoy. We're really excited about it. I think there's a ton to be learned throughout this episode. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Yemeni, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
I'm doing pretty awesome, Ryan. How are you?
Great, man. Great. We've been
excited to be here, by the way. I've been watching the show now forever, and like to actually be sitting here and be a part of it is pretty cool.
Awesome, man. We've been talking about it for a long time. We're like, we just got to do it, and I think now is a really good time, and there's a ton that we're going to talk about that I think people are going to be excited about.
Agreed.
Awesome, man.
Let's jump on in. Where do you want to start?
Let's do it. Well, I want to talk a little bit about early in life, because you have a really interesting story, like growing up in Colombia. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, you were an immigrant born in Colombia. What was that like, and that entire process? How did that shape your future?
Well, it's certainly big impact on how the future was shaped. But yeah, I was born in Colombia, South America, for those who may not be familiar with where Colombia happens to be. And I lived there until I was 10. And it was, as much as I can remember from the first 10 years of my life, a good life. I was very wealthy in Colombia. I lived a very good life. We lived in a big home with maids, and we had bodyguards, whole other story there as to why that would be. But just a very interesting life. And I do recall knowing then that it was interesting that there was wealth in the country and extreme poverty and like no real middle class, nothing in the middle. And that was something that really stood out to me then. But anyway, my mom and my sister and I moved to the US when I was 10. And we went from that very affluent, comfortable life to living in Southern California and sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with my 3 cousins and my aunt. So it's a pretty drastic lifestyle change, but hey, we were in the U.S.
Well, and that's amazing. And I've only gotten the chance to talk to your mom like on Instagram and Facebook, and that's a huge move. She's amazing, like absolutely amazing. And you can tell like she would be someone that would say, "Listen, I'm looking out for the best interest of my kids. Like, I need to make this move." And so how did that, like, did that make an impact on you very early on? Like, hey, my mom's willing to risk it all, really, for the betterment of us. How did that did that inspire you to be like, hey, I really got to go out and get to work?
100%. So imagine you have a mom who's working 3 jobs to put food on the table, and they're crappy jobs, right? So one of them, I remember she used to work, we lived in Southern California in Santa Ana, which not the best part of SoCal, but it's got its good parts, it's got its rough parts too. But she would drive from Santa Ana all the way to LA, which is a crappy drive in the freeways of LA, to work a commission-only job selling furniture in some furniture store in the middle of LA somewhere, and often drive back empty-handed because nothing was sold. It was a commission-only job. So seeing my mom struggle and have to deal with the challenges of raising 2 kids and by herself definitely motivated me to never want to be in a situation where I was dependent on somebody, or I couldn't take care of myself, or I was not able to be financially independent. So very early on, I think that instilled in me the good habits of being thrifty with my money, and also to be smart with making money and investing money. So yeah, and then obviously you don't want to see your mom be challenged like that and struggle like that. So big motivator in life to be successful and make it so that the whole family cannot have to struggle as well.
Love that. And so how did that lead into you became obsessed with like health, fitness, bodybuilding? How did that transition from when like you moved to the US when you were 10? When did that process start getting started?
It's weird. I have a memory of being about 6 or 7 years old in Colombia, sitting in front of a mirror in one of our houses, drawing like pecs on myself and abs and flexing in front of the mirror, having no muscles, but wishing I had muscles. So that's like the earliest memory I have of where I was thinking about, I want big muscles. I want to be fit. I want to be strong. When I came to the US, I was exposed to bodybuilding and Muscle and Fitness magazine and Flex magazine. I was just looking at these pictures of these gods, like these giant, muscular, huge men. I remember thinking, like, how is that even humanly possible? And I early on got bitten by the bodybuilding bug. And so I started lifting weights. And before I knew it, I was a competitive bodybuilder as a teenager in my early 20s. And I was deep into it.
And if people are watching the video, they can clearly see that that's still the case. But people that are listening just on audio, like, we always talk about it. Like, anytime we're together, we're like, dude, if there's a piece of paper around Yemeni, we need to be careful because his veins are just out everywhere. Like, I'm afraid he's going to bleed out, like, with a paper cut.
They don't bleed too easily, but it is it makes it easy to get blood tests and things like that.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, to this very day, it's still a big passion of mine. And I would say, like, the biggest difference in the way that I approach, like, body composition and building muscle and being lean and all that today versus how I thought about it then. Then I, as a young boy, as a young man, I equated big muscles with power and, you know, commanding respect and that sort of thing. I was wrong. It didn't give you any of those things. When I won my first bodybuilding contest, I remember thinking, I made it. Like, I've won a contest. I'm a bodybuilder, and nothing really changed in life other than I had a big plastic trophy. How I think about it today is more for feeling good and longevity and just being able to function in life without any kind of pain or issues or things of that nature. Over the years of training as much as I've done and eating the way that I've done over some parts of my life, I'm sure I did plenty of damage to my joints and things like that. So I definitely reached a point in my 30s where I felt old and decrepit, and I really couldn't move much anymore. And I really blamed much of it on the way that I trained for all those years. But as it turned out, much of it had to do with my diet. And so making some changes in my diet a few years ago made a lot of dramatic changes in my life and kind of reignited this big passion that I've always had for health and fitness and nutrition.
And that's really interesting because one of the things you've always done, and you talk about this, is not only you with exercise, but with diet as well. You're like the king of experimentation. Like, you're not just going to take the Flex magazine article and be like, oh, I'm going to do this because this guy said it. You've always experimented with yourself. What kind of drove that? Why are you always, like, testing things on yourself, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work? What kind of drives that mindset?
I think probably the first thing was competing as a bodybuilder. So the thought of getting into a skimpy little, whatever, posing trunks and getting on stage and standing in front of people with nothing to hide motivates you to really want to, like, get results and achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in terms of developing your physique. And so if something's not working, it's not working. So you got to try something different. So if I were to read an article on a Muscle and Fitness magazine and one of the bodybuilders of the time gave a diet, I would follow it to the T, not really get the results that they had gotten, and thought to myself, okay, something's not right here. So very early on, I just started to study the basics of nutrition and how those things impact my body. I can tell you that more than 20 years ago, when I worked with a company called Metrics, and we'll probably get into this at some point, we launched the very first ketogenic product line, Keto Pro. I'll send you some of the images of what the products were. But we took MCT powder and plated it on protein and had, like, one of the very first ever, like, keto shakes over 20 years ago. Wow. So even way back then, I was reading everything that I could and then bringing it home, experimenting, seeing what worked, kept it, and what didn't work, kind of discarded it. And I've just been doing that ever since.
Amazing. And I do want to jump into that because people know you as, like, being, like, you've worked with a bunch of people in the food industry, and not just, like, hey, working with this person or that person. Like, they are powerhouses. Like, Metrics, we'll talk a little bit about Quest. Like, you've worked with some of the best companies. Let's talk about that. Like, what got you started in there? What was your first position, and kind of what did you do there?
Yeah, I've been very, very lucky in my career that for the most part, I've been able to do things in life as far as work that are very much aligned with my passions. And so if I were to if you were to ask me what like one of my big passions in life, so fitness, obviously it's one of them. We've talked about it. Food is the other one. I'm just obsessed with food, and so they kind of contradict or conflict with one another, because one of my passions is not necessarily the best for me. I love pizza, I love cheese, I love wine, I love, just going to restaurants, discovering new foods. I love cooking. I love going to the grocery store. I go up and down every single aisle, just exploring, trying to find the latest and greatest, whatever it may be. So that's one passion, and that's always been there. And then the conflicting passion is wanting to be fit and healthy. So my career has brought these two together in a number of ways, kind of all throughout my career. Metrics was kind of like the very first true career job I ever had. And before that I was working like, teenage jobs, GNC and things like that. But Metrics was really interesting. I got very, very lucky because one, it was a startup. And I got to be in that startup environment as things were kind of just coming together, and it's just not quite there yet. And you're not sure if it's ever going to make it or not, but it was that. Two, Dr. Scott Connolly, he was the founder of the company. And at the time, there hadn't ever really been a supplement or food company with a real medical doctor behind it with, actual rationale and research to how the products are getting developed. Most of the companies were just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what would stick. So Metrics kind of changed the game and made things a lot more legitimate. And for that reason, it became the #1 company at the time. And it was so ahead of the game. Back then, we already had foods. We had low-carb pasta, low-carb pizza, low-carb pancakes. Like I mentioned earlier, we launched the very first ketogenic product line. I was talking to my good friend Vince Andrews yesterday, that's actually somebody worth having on the podcast one day. Talk about an encyclopedia of knowledge on the history of our industry. But he was one of the key people in charge of developing that formulation of keto products back with Connolly. And so we were just reminiscing about that the other day. I was like, oh my God, it's over 20 years ago.
Wow.
So but I was fortunate to work with Dr. Connolly, and I still stay in touch with him today. But like you mentioned, like when Atkins was exploding, I had an opportunity to work with Dr. Atkins directly himself. And we actually launched the first Atkins ice cream nationally, which was, at the height of the whole Atkins craze. We sold tons of it. But I've also had an opportunity to work with like people like Ron Penna with Quest Nutrition, which I was with that company for a number of years. And people like him, not a lot of people know him, but he is like a powerhouse in our industry who's kind of behind a lot of the big shifts and changes that have happened over the last, 5 years or so. And I've had the pleasure of working alongside with him all those years. So I have had a lot of good luck in terms of the people that I get to work with, collaborate with, and kind of bring products to market with, and I've just learned a ton from them. Right.
And so after Metrics, you went to Nestle/Dreyer's, and that was like the ice cream part of, like, you went through this journey of like, wow, you guys were really ahead of the curve with Metrics. You were launching low carb, a keto product, and then you went to Dreyer's. What was the atmosphere like there? Like, what was your guys' main focus?
So after Metrics, it was they were like at the peak. They were the #1 company at the time, and I remember thinking to myself, after it was acquired and then reacquired and bought and sold, I've literally lost track of where Metrics is at today. It's still a brand out there today, but I had my heart broken because it was a brand that I put my heart and soul into, and I saw it just kind of be changed into something that was very different. And so I wanted to not go back into the industry. The only options at the time were other companies that were competing with Metrics. I just spent, 5 years competing against those guys. So I just didn't want to just go from Metrics to EAS or something like that. So I really wanted to try something different and expand my horizons and see what was out there. And I also wanted to understand like best practices at a $1 billion company. Up until that point, Metrics was a $100 million company, right? So big for our industry, but tiny when you compare it to, real companies in bigger industries. And so Dreyer's, Nestle, multi-billion-dollar corporation, lots of best practices there. I wanted to go there and learn. And so I spent a couple of years there doing just that, and I learned a ton. Now, in that time, I took a little bit of a detour from like my fitness lifestyle and my obsession with nutrition, and I got immersed into this world of ice cream and junk food and frozen foods and all of that. And believe me, I paid the consequences. Probably the only time in my life where I legitimately was chunky, and I would be embarrassed to take my shirt off at the beach because I was just in horrible shape. And I was still working out, and that's something that's never left me. It's just kind of ingrained in me. I get up, I go to the gym, and I get it done. But I was eating like crap. and definitely I suffer the consequences from that.
Wow. And then after that, you kind of went on, you started your own thing, the company named after actually your two amazing daughters. And so talk a little bit about that. You helped launch a lot of companies under that brand, right?
I did. So the company was a food brokering company. And for those of you listening who may not know what that is, imagine you have an idea for a cool product that you want to bring to market. You've done the keto diet a couple of years. You want to do a keto donut, and you've tinkered in your kitchen, and you want to bring it to market. But you're not sure how to do it. You're not sure who to go to, what customers to sell it to. That's what my company did. So we focused a lot with small and medium brands that had some level of success in a niche market, and then we helped them scale in a big way by going into bigger stores, whether it would be like a Costco or a Trader Joe's or a Walmart. And then to do that, they would all often have to reposition their entire brand and think through their pricing and think through the product assortment. So we helped them kind of get all of that stuff aligned so they'd have a much easier time scaling. So I did that for like 12 years, and had a lot of fun doing it because I was good at it. I would only really partner with brands that I had some level of passion for, or that I thought had tremendous upside. And during that time, it really allowed me to focus on being a dad. So my daughter's at that stage where they're just going through grade school, and so it gave me an opportunity to be a soccer coach and president of the swim team, and just be very involved in all those things as I helped all these other brands kind of scale and grow. Now, one of those brands, in how that ultimately all evolved into something else, came across my desk, and it's a brand that not a lot of people had heard of at the time. I had kind of heard of them. I happened to be experimenting with a gluten-free diet at the time, and they had sent me samples, and I hadn't even bothered to look at them because they were a protein bar. I didn't think it was going. And I remember thinking like, oh God, another protein bar. Like, no one needs another protein bar. It's like a dying category. And they sat in my office, and I had an office much like I do now, just full of samples and products everywhere. And they were sitting there one day, and I was hungry, and I was on a gluten-free diet, and I looked at the ingredients, and I thought, okay, they're gluten-free. I'll try them. And I tried them, and I thought, okay, these aren't bad, but how are these guys going to market their way into success? Like, there's so many brands, and there's detour bars and everything else. I was wrong. The company was Quest Nutrition. They were just in their second year, and they reached out. They needed help getting into a key account that was saying no to them because they didn't understand what it was. And so long story short, I met the founders. I met Tom. I met Ron, who I mentioned earlier, and Mike, and then Nick, who was the chief marketing officer. Loved those guys. Fit right in with them. And before I knew it, I was selling my business and joining the Quest team.
And so what was that environment like? Because people see Quest Nutrition now, and they're like, I see them in every gas station. Like, I see them all over the place. They're like world renowned. But at the time when you joined, it was very different. But one of the things that I've always known, because every single one of those guys, Mike, Ron, Tom, are just absolute class acts. And they put together something that I think every entrepreneur like really should take away, regardless of what brand they're in, is like early on, that environment was unbelievable. Like, I remember going and visiting the headquarters, and it was like everyone was churning. Like, you were there, all these different people like were just. It wasn't just like a work environment. People were crushing it. What was it like being in that environment?
Really intoxicating in a good way. I can't even begin to describe to you how amazing that environment was. So at the time, I was running my own business, living in Northern California, tiny little boutique broker, mind you. It was me and 2.5 people. I had a part-time analyst and a full-time assistant, and it was me. And then I would go into the Quest environment. And at the time, the offices were nothing special. Compton, it was a strip mall type of a building with the warehouse attached to it. Nothing fancy. People were sitting in buckets. Those were the chairs. I remember I had my original interview with Ron Penna. We went into some dingy, dark room. We sat on 2 buckets and talked for an hour. I remember thinking, like, what is this thing? And all the meetings have to be done in a car outside in the parking lot. There was no conference room. So if you had to have a conference call or something, everyone jumps in a car and does a meeting. That's how it started. And by the way, I missed the step before that when they were in an even crappier building. So when it was year 1, it was even worse than that. So year 2, I came in, and that's what was going on. But at the time, hardly any distribution. The bars were in GNC and Vitamin Shop, and They had just transitioned over from the original fiber, and we should have a nice long chat about fibers, which was chicory root, to IMO, and that made a big difference in how the bars digested and how people were able to consume them. So everything just started taking off at that time. And like you said, that environment was just intoxicating. I would fly down from Northern California. At the time, I was just consulting, and I would come in for a couple of days. Every time I would step in, it would be like stepping into a room full of boundless energy. Like just everybody was buzzing, things were going off left and right. There was sections. We had eventually moved out of that one small space and moved into the hacienda house, is what we called it. It reminded me of like a Mexican restaurant or something, but it was like a big house, and all the like executive offices were like corner bedrooms. It was kind of interesting. And then you had sections in there, like the creative design art section was like one of my favorite things. I'd walk in there and it was like dark and lights and music, and you had all this really creative people tatted up with rings and tattoo, all kinds of stuff. So I loved all that. And then you had another section for the R&D people. One of the things that people don't know about Quest is that at one point it had a 42-person R&D department. That's how you make killer products. You've got a whole team of people solely focused on making things better each and every single day, and that's what they were doing. Can you imagine like being able to go there on a regular basis? Like, what are you guys working on today? What's the coolest new thing that's happening here? So that was part of the environment. And then I ran sales. So when I came in, I started to build the sales organization. And when I first came in, there was 2 people running sales. By the time that I left, we had over 40 salespeople. And that team, that sales team, was able to take Quest from the handful of accounts that it was in when I first came on board to over 96 countries and over 80,000 points of distribution where you can find those bars today.
Incredible. And just like as an outsider's point of view, like when I remember going into that like little house and seeing everyone in there, and you'd go over and they're like, hey, it was like, hey, come over here, and there's like something like in this sketchy wrapper that doesn't have anything to just try it. And you're trying all these things and you're like, damn, that would be a killer product. And so to your point, like there was all these things that may or may not one day see the light of day, but like there was crazy stuff being worked on, and that's an electric environment. Like being able to have like that many people thinking about like, wait, how do we change this category? How do we completely revolutionize this and be a disruptor in this category? It's incredible. And you touched on a point that I want to dive into because it was ultimately one of the biggest stories, I think, of Quest. And we were both around for that time, and there's a lot that was going on. Was the Quest bar was absolutely delicious, like when it had the isomalto-oligosaccharide or the IMO fiber, and they were always soft. The chocolate chip was like it literally was like a chocolate chip cookie. And then can you tell us a little bit about what inspired all of a sudden they made this switch to something known as soluble corn fiber? What inspired that, and then what kind of series of events transpired right after that?
It's a hell of a story, and I hope that one day somebody writes a nice case story out of it, or heck, I might even write the Inside Quest book one day, and this will be one of the chapters. But it's a good lesson on company values and sticking to company values regardless of revenues and profit. So I mentioned earlier when Quest was first launched, the original fiber used was chicory root fiber. And I'll take this moment to just mention something. I'm seeing a ton of companies enter the landscape today, and I love it, by the way, emerging companies, bringing products to market that we all want to eat and enjoy. And a lot of them are starting out just like Quest did, like in somebody's kitchen, tinkering with something. You come up with an interesting formula, you're passionate about keto, I'm going to bring keto something to market. Where Quest took it a step further is that R&D department, a legit R&D department, because as many people know the Quest story, Shannon herself started making Quest bars in her kitchen, but once those bars left her kitchen and came into the R&D room, the more real work began to make these things viable to actually be put in a store shelf and have a shelf life, and not have ingredients that might upset your stomach. And one of the things that we discovered was, chicory root fiber wrecks your stomach. And so as quick as possible, we moved away from that fiber and we stumbled onto isomalto oligosaccharides, which at the time everyone believed to be a full fiber, non-digestible fiber. And so we put that into the formula of the brand, and things worked out great. Until we started hearing from random people, inconsistently, it was sporadic, that they would get a blood glucose spike when eating a Quest bar. And we thought, God, what's driving that? I mean, super high fiber, super low carbs. We were scratching our heads, and eventually, to make a very long story short, we discovered and realized that IMOs do partially digest and are, in fact, more of a carbohydrate than they are a fiber. And so the minute we uncovered that, the work began to find an alternative source of a fiber, and that turned out to be soluble corn fiber. And when we discovered that, we thought, let's not make an abrupt change. Let's introduce a couple of flavors with the new fiber just to test it out and make sure that people like it and that people don't have any problems with it. And we launched 2 flavors with it, s'mores and chocolate mint, if I remember correctly. And they became instant hits. Nobody said a word. No one cared. No one mentioned anything. People loved it. And so we thought, great, let's just transition the whole line to this real fiber. The product will be better. Unfortunately, it's way more expensive than IMO, soluble corn fiber, but we don't care. We care about the product's integrity. And so we switched it. Unfortunately, something bad happened when we made that switch, something out of our control. One of our protein suppliers had a process change in how they manufactured something. Nothing changed about the specs and the protein, but something about the process changed enough so that when we had our new formula with our new fiber, something like 5 or 6 weeks later, the bar would just turn into a brick. And so we were making these things, launching them out into market. They looked fine. They tasted fine. 6 weeks later, people are calling us and saying, this thing's a brick. What's happening? And when that would happen, people would wonder, like, what's going on with this thing? They would look at the label and realize, oh, they changed the formula. It used to be this. It's now that. And so, of course, they automatically concluded that it must have been because of the formula change, not because of this other weird process change that our manufacturer had done. So it took us a long time to uncover that problem. Ron and his 42-person R&D team were working around the clock trying to re-engineer this bar and figure out what's happening here. And ultimately, they uncovered it and fixed it. And so today, if you were to eat a Quest bar, they're pretty freaking good. They're soft. They're yummy. They've got metabolic integrity. They don't, they're not going to have a massive insulin spike. And so it was all ultimately fixed, but not before a ton of damage was done. During the year of this entire transition, lots of people got the wrong idea. People assumed that Quest had sold out, that they had taken out IMO and put in corn. This is cheaper. And why would you put corn in a Quest bar? People were freaking out. Ultimately, the company took a big hit in revenues as a result of that, but it was the right thing to do. Now, here's the important part. Nobody forced Quest to do that. The FDA hadn't mandated that IMOs were not being properly labeled. We could have just kept selling the bars as we had and not changed anything. And in fact, they could have still been doing this to this very day, because still the FDA has not ruled on how you should properly label IMO. So as we sit here today, Ryan, there's bars on shelves in stores being sold online with IMO in their label, not properly labeling it, which means that the bars that you guys are eating that have IMO in them are probably a lot higher in net carbs than you guys actually think. So kudos to Quest, by the way. I have nothing to do with them anymore. They don't pay me anything. I earn nothing from them, but I still think it's the best bar on the market. In spite of soluble corn fiber, which is a fiber. It's a soluble corn fiber, not a protein. So it's non-GMO. Nothing that's bad about corn is included in a soluble corn fiber. Soluble corn fiber is actually a pretty freaking awesome fiber that has a lot of wonderful properties about it that you may want to consume more of. So unfortunately, it's got the word corn in it. So that makes some people scared.
Right. No, I love that. And I think people just learned there's a lot, and I'm with you. One day I told the team that I eventually want to do this documentary of the Quest journey, because I think I just have so much respect for you, people like Ron, Mike, Tom, and what their grit and determination and literally the cojones to take a brand that's doing millions and millions of dollars and go, we're going to make this switch because we want to do it for the right reasons. And then to have all these people, sales dip, and all these people go, you guys suck, you switched, you sold out, it's cheaper. And it was the complete opposite. They were doing it for the right reasons. I love that. And that, that's why I'll always be.
People were angry. I mean, people, imagine, a consumer who is on a strict diet and they're trying their hardest every day to stick to this freaking thing. And they have one thing every day that they look forward to eating, and that's their precious little treat, whatever that may be. And for millions of people, that treat was a Quest bar. And suddenly that treat changed from one day to the next. It was yummy and good for me. Now it's hard and ugh. What happened? So people were emotionally angry and upset. Now imagine a retailer. You're a retailer and you're making bank because you're selling Quest bars all day long, and then suddenly Quest bar sales stop. And you're like, what's happening here? They were not happy. I was the head of sales, so I got to deal with all those angry people like, you guys suck, our sales are down, what's happening here? But you know what? It was the right thing to do. And ultimately, it paid off. The company's doing much better today. They're off and running, launching new products. I don't know if you tried the Quest pizza or not, but I've got a freezer stock full of them. They're friggin' amazing, so love it. Those guys started what I would consider to be the reinvigoration of our industry. Because before Quest came along, I think that quite a few of the categories were just flat and stale. Like the bar category was beginning to shrink. You were looking at retailers like Trader Joe's at one point had over 120 bar SKUs. They had kind of chopped that down to about 60, like half of the space. And that space was being given to other categories that were just doing better. Suddenly Quest comes along and literally quadruples the size of the bar category and gives birth to all these new bars that are now hitting the market, all these Quest bar knockoffs and similar type bars. And suddenly you've got a whole, thriving industry again.
For sure. And before we jump into like the next venture, I want to talk because you're head of sales for Quest. And I think this is important for people who are like, I get this question all the time, especially like young entrepreneurs that are launching a new product. There were some big retailers that came to you and said, I want to put your product inside of store. And you said, nope. And you literally, like anyone, you would think like, oh, I want to go into this big retailer, but you're like, nope, because you're going to charge me X, Y, and Z for slotting fees and all these different things. And you turned them down until Quest got to this point where they're like, I'm begging you, I'll do anything for you to come into my store. So how do you have that like kind of mindset of like, you know what, I'm not going to rush into a store. I'm going to focus on online. I'm going to focus on building a community. I'm going to focus on the brand before I introduce it to stores.
I think a lot of it has to do with just my general philosophy for life, which is delayed gratification, or to not eat the marshmallow, for anyone who's familiar with that analogy. Yeah, it's easy. Like in fact, I was just doing some consulting work for somebody recently, and they've got this really neat product that 3 retailers have already come to them and said they want it. One of those being Walmart. And I remember told them, like, you haven't even started selling online. Like, don't go to Walmart on day one. That's like 4,000 stores that you may or may not stay on shelf for very long. And it comes with a lot. Like, you better be ready to do business with Walmart. So Quest was a very unique opportunity. And this is not something you can do with just any brand. This is something you would do with a brand that you can develop a lot of strong demand for. But I remember when I stepped into Quest, already Tom and Nick on the marketing side had just built this really neat like frenzy for the brand. Like something I'd never seen before. And I remember thinking, okay, this thing has pull. This thing has a lot of demand. And there's one thing that kind of equalizes everything when you're going to go sell something to a retailer. Typically, if you're a brand and you present something to a retailer, there's way more products trying to get on that shelf than there's room for products. And so it just gives the retailer always the upper hand. They're always trying to decide of the 5,000 things that are being thrown at me, I can only fit 10. What 10 are going to go in here? And so that kind of gives birth to retailers being able to charge for things like slotting and crazy ad fees, and just the cost of doing business with them just goes through the roof. Unless you have a power brand that's got a ton of demand, and they just want it at that point, because that to them is life. The retailer lives by brands that bring in foot traffic. If somebody's not going into your store, you're not selling squat. And so the reason why people go into your stores are looking for hot products that they've heard about, that they want, that they use, that are a brand that they identify with. And when you have one of those, it kind of evens things out. So you're able to go to a retailer and negotiate slightly better. The story that you were telling about, like Walmart came to us very early on. I mean, they saw the bar and they were like, oh yeah, this makes sense. We want it in our stores. But we were not ready for Walmart from, just infrastructure standpoint. We understood what kind of a brand we had and what kind of demand we had. And we knew that going into Walmart would be just massive volume. So if we're going to do it, we need to be ready. So that was one reason. The other reason too, though, is um, Quest was a very cool brand with lots of cachet. And like the minute you go into like a mass market retailer like that, you lose a lot of that core audience that automatically assumes or thinks, oh, this is now like a for everybody kind of brand. It's kind of like if there's a band that you love and that you listen to and that hardly anybody knows about, and suddenly they sell out and everyone's listening to them, like, eh. It has that kind of an impact. So knowing that, we wanted to go into Walmart in a smart way. And so we said no to them for like four years in a row. I remember being at the Expo West show, which is coming up here pretty soon, one year, and I had back-to-back appointments the entire time with our existing retailers. Walmart came to that, like, just to meet with us, and we had no time for them. Like, we literally said, we'll have to reschedule. We've got back-to-back meetings. They came back, I think, the next day and like have a quick 10-minute with us. But the way this all of it ultimately culminated was when we finally said yes to Walmart, and it took them flying to us, to our corporate offices and their entire team, and they had to present to us why it would make sense to have Quest on their shelves. When we finally said yes, it had to be under better terms, and that included, we don't just want to go in there with 2 flavors and sit on the bottom shelf and cross our fingers and hope that we can grow from there. We want to go in with the full assortment, have end caps, and have a big launch so that we make a big impact. And more importantly, we wanted to make sure that the shelves that we went on were customized to give the brand the premium look that the brand had versus everything else. And so we did all of that. And the result was a record-breaking launch at Walmart that's yet to be matched to this day.
Incredible, man. And so now I want to go to after Quest. So post Quest, you ended up at a company called No Foods. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, what did you know about No Foods before going into it, and that whole jump and journey of like, hey, here's this new company that actually had a little bit different spin on things?
Yeah. So as amazing as Quest was, it became big. And just to put it into perspective, we from startup until the year that I left, we went from like 0 to $500 million in revenue. So most companies in our space never get to $20-30 million. If you're doing $20-30 million in revenue, that's pretty respectable. It's pretty awesome. If you break the $100 million mark, god dang, you're in there. You're like, you've made it. 500 million, that was just staggering. But when you get that big, it's a very different type of company. It's a different type of day. I remember, at one point realizing, oh, I don't even know everybody in my whole team. This is crazy. Like, I went from, I know everybody really, really well to, wow, there's people that are, out in the field that I hardly talk to. And as it got bigger and bigger, it's less fun for me. There's a certain stage of growth in a company that I most enjoy. And when I'm enjoying something, I'm better at it. And so I was craving that whole kind of small, medium type company environment again. And right around that time, Quest was evolving. Tom had already left, and Tom had been somebody who I really enjoyed working with a lot. Nick had already left; he was our head of marketing. And so the time came for me to move on and try something different. And I thought what I was going to do was start my own company. It's something I'd been wanting to do for quite some time, but No Foods kind of came into my life. And the way that it happened, I happened to just be doing research I was going to be on a podcast, and the topic was going to be allulose. Doing research on allulose, I saw No Foods, and I was like, oh, I thought we were the only company doing allulose. Quest. We had been the first ones. We'd introduced the cereal bars with allulose, and then later the hero bars. But I was intrigued that somebody else was innovative enough to do some product formulations with allulose. I had my assistant order a bunch of the products, and the CEO of the company saw that somebody from Quest had ordered products, realized it was me, and then reached out to me, and we connected. His name was Steve Hanley. And I've always been very collaborative. At the time, I wasn't thinking about even going to work for somebody else. Like I said, I was going to start my own company, so I was being very generous with advice and strategic tips on how to scale his business. He was in that second year stage, and he had admired what Quest had done. He wanted to do something similar. And so that's how it began. And ultimately, after chatting with him and doing some consulting work with them, they made me an offer that I thought, all right, this is a company worth playing around with. And the thing that really tipped me over, and I can't say his name because I don't know if he wants people to know that he's an investor, but I was looking through the list of investors, and this was one of the interesting things about No. It had over a cap table of over 200 people. So lots of investors in this company. I've never seen that before. And many of these investors are big name people who are very influential that can really, have a big impact on a company if they really wanted to. And one of those names is perhaps one of the most like credible and respected medical doctors in our field today. And I remember thinking, oh, if he's on board, and I saw he had eaten all the products and done his blood work and all that, and he was excited about it. I'm like, if he's on, I'm in. And I was excited to be in the company just because he was an investor. And so I jumped in as a president of sales and marketing. I was charged with opening a sales and marketing office here in California where I live. The company was based out of Atlanta. And because Quest was going through an evolution and lots of people had left, it was a prime time to kind of hire some key people that I had been working with for a number of years and put a really slick team together and just start to scale the no foods business. And so we did just that. We started to scale it, market it, and bring it to market. And then Chipgate happened.
Yeah, so I want to jump into that because that was probably what no foods, like people know no foods because of you, and they know no foods because of Chipgate 2018. So for people that are like, what the heck is this? Can you tell people a little bit about what Chipgate was or is?
Yeah, and I have to do a little bit of background just to explain how or why something like that could even happen. But so I come in, I'm a president of sales and marketing. I've got an office that I've opened in California, and I don't really have access to anything outside of sales and marketing stuff. I don't have access to the product formulation work. I don't have access to company finances. I don't really have access to much other than the functions that I'm overseeing in the sales and marketing side of the business. And I knew there was lots of things that needed to be fixed with the company. That's one of the things that attracted me to it. I looked at it and thought, oh, like this thing's doing well in spite of so many blundering things being done. So let me come in and fix a lot of stuff. It's going to be easy to do. And things like the cookie was like way too big and they were missing a peanut butter flavor. So like, okay, no brainer, we'll launch a peanut butter flavor, make the cookie, smaller so more people will want to eat it. Easy fixes like that. The packaging, I could tell most of the packaging wasn't really to spec, small emerging startup company. I spent a lot of time looking at those today, and pretty much consistently across the board, most of these smaller companies don't know what the hell they're doing with packaging. It's pretty bad. So nothing unusual there. These are things that companies learn and get better and better at as they evolve. And I thought that's what I'm being hired here to come in and do, like help the company evolve to that next level. Unfortunately, we had a CEO that was he didn't listen to anybody. He had a very stern vision of what he wanted to do, and he was not going to deviate from that. And he fancied himself a financial architect, meaning he was raising capital, he was going to scale this business, he was going to sell it at some point, he was going to be rich. And that's not how you start a business. Like, you don't build a business to make money. You don't build a business to get rich. And that was probably like the first red flag that I thought to myself, wait a minute, this isn't how we built Quest. Like, Quest was built on a mission. Quest was built on what we just talked about. Who cares if we are going to lose money? We're going to change this formula and make it right. In this company, it was the opposite. And so one of the things that what Chipgate's all about, the chocolate chip cookies that No had back then were using for the chocolate chips Enjoy Life chocolate chips, which happened to have actual sugar in them. And that was not included in the packaging. Like, it would say on the ingredients, chocolate chips, and then it should have said in parentheses what's in those chocolate chips. Now, it was disclosed on the label, but not on the actual nutritionals. And so somebody just wrote an innocent question to customer service on email one day, like, hey, what's in these chocolate chips? And the customer service person answered honestly, oh, it's Enjoy Life chocolate chips, and this is what's in them. And as soon as that person saw, wait a minute, there's sugar in here, and you guys are saying these are keto, like how, what? And so that exploded into an entire social media storm. And when I first saw that, I remember thinking, okay, that's not good that's not on the label, so just fix that right away. But if these chocolate chips have actual sugar in them, what is the actual sugar content in the product? And the response was, well, there's only 5 grams of chocolate chips in there. So if there's only 5 grams of chocolate chips, it would meet the nutritional specs. So I thought, okay, that makes sense, as long as there really is only 5 grams of chocolate chips in there, because if there's any more, then the nutritional labels are not accurate. And I remember telling the CEO at this time, if they don't contain the true amount of chocolate chips that we're claiming, 5 grams of chocolate chips, somebody online can very easily just like pick them out, weigh them, and say, there's more than 5 grams in here. And they probably do it on social live or something. I kid you not. That same day, Keto Connect on their IG live were literally taking the chips out of the cookie one by one and weighing them to see if in fact that was true. And of course, it wasn't true. It was like 25 grams of chocolate chips in there, way more than the product should have had. And so that was Chipcade. That happened on December. I remember it was like right before Christmas, and suddenly the internet blew up with what's happening with No Foods cookies. And of course, I was pissed. I wasn't happy about that. I don't know how much of this I can disclose, but I can tell you the outcome of that was that person is not the CEO of the company anymore and is in no way, shape, or form associated with the company anymore. And the cookie was fixed. The company developed its own chocolate chips made with allulose, replaced them. It's been almost 2 years now or a year and a half, whatever, since the chocolate chips were replaced. And they're legit cookies now. I'll eat them from time to time. Anyway, that's the story of Chipgate. And so really awesome lesson for anyone listening to this. If you're managing a brand, be transparent, be honest from the get-go. Like, blunders will happen. Nobody's perfect. No brand is perfect. No company's perfect. Consumers want to know that you're doing your best to fix things and make them better. Sweeping something under the rug, ignoring it, and not addressing it, bad mistake.
Huge. And I love that you just told that story, because it's really one of the stories that inspired us to really create this ketogenic certification. Because at the end of the day, it's like only so much can be told on a label. You need to do testing. You need to understand. You need to see the certificate of analysis to know, oh, wow, these are the actual chocolate chips they're using, or, oh, this is the actual fiber they're using and they're claiming this. That's probably not, like, people, like, think, the way I look at it is like this. There are people who are epileptics who are consuming some of these products, and like a spike in glucose could mean the difference between them having a seizure and not. And so that's where I'm like, it's not a game to play around with. And I love that you're like, hey, whatever it is, you're going to mess up. Like, whatever the company that's starting, be authentic, be transparent, be like, hey, we screwed up. Here's how we're fixing it. I promise we're going to be on it. Like Quest, like, they didn't even know they screwed up, but they immediately went to go fixing these things, and they didn't even have to. That wasn't even something that they had to do. So amazing point. And so you step in, and one of the things you kind of take over and do a lot of stuff for No Foods when everything kind of changed. You made sure the cookies were reformulated, everything was back to normal. One of the last things I want to ask you about with No Foods is you took over and you had to deal, like you said, with all of these VCs. What is that? How's that like versus like, hey, you can kind of control things versus like, no, I have to answer 200 emails every single day. Does that limit your capacity? So if someone's like, hey, I want to bring on a ton of money, what are some considerations they should have?
You know what? It is an entirely different ballgame in so many ways, in most of which I didn't even see coming. So every company that I've worked with prior to No was a bootstrap company. Like Quest was bootstrap. We didn't raise any money to get to $500 million. Literally bootstrap the company, which is freaking crazy. No, on the other hand, much like a lot of the companies that are emerging today, like venture capital money almost right out of the gate. And it has its pros and cons. I mean, obviously, if you've got lots of capital, you can right out of on the outset, like launch a brand, get awareness, get trial, and get rocking and rolling and kind of fast track things if you have a good product. If you don't, doesn't matter how much money you have, it's not going to be good in the end. But the trade-off to that is people who've invested money in your company want to see a return, and often their opinions on how that should go about happening might be very different from the people actually running the company. So that was definitely, I felt it both with the board. So we had a formal board of directors, and on that board you had key investors, and many of them had strong opinions about what we should and shouldn't do. For example, I got a lot of flack on a regular basis about doing any kind of marketing targeting the keto community. And they kept talking about, like, what's all this keto stuff? It's like a niche. We got to go broader. And I kept trying to explain to people, like, listen, you have to build a core audience, a core consumer that loves the brand. We've got a cookie that's 80% fat. Like, most soccer moms out there are going to look at this and go, no, thank you, not for me. But someone who's keto is going to look at that and go, oh, that's exactly for me. So talking to the right audiences at the right time, like these were challenging things to have to deal with on a regular basis. But outside of the board, we've got this cap table of 200 plus investors, and it's not so much that they are calling or suggesting what should be done, but they just want to know. And as I mentioned earlier, many of these are heavy hitters that are like multi-billionaires that can, with a flick, make or break your company if they wanted to. So you got to take their calls and you've got to indulge their questions and you've got to answer them. But with 200 of them, I suddenly realized, oh, that's my current job is talking to investors all day long. Like that's literally what I was doing for a long time. And I remember thinking, it's not what I want to do. And it's not how I'm going to be able to grow this business. And so thankfully, I was able to evolve and transition and build a team and kind of structure things in a way that allowed me to be able to do that. But yeah, ultimately, it's got its trade-offs, and I would be I would hold off as long as humanly possible to take capital before you actually need to.
I think there's so many lessons throughout this entire podcast that people are going to take away just from everything you've done and all the trials and tribulations you've gone through up to this point. But one of the last things I want to talk about, it's 2019. I want to talk about a new horizon. Things have recently taken a big change for you. You're working on some new and exciting stuff. So first, let's talk a little bit about like you're doing a bunch of these experiments. You have this blog. You're doing all this testing. What are you working on right now? Like the 2019 comes around, you're doing 7-day fast. You're testing different bars. You're testing a bunch of stuff. What are you up to now?
So I think this is the year where I'm going to finally start to share these things because it's not new. I've been tinkering for 30 plus years. I have photographs that I've been taking from the time I was 14 or 15, tracking my body composition progress. I ditched the scale a long time ago. Who's still weighing themselves? Throw your scale away. It's whether close fit or not, and literally how you're looking. But these are since 14 or 15 years old. I've got hundreds of photos. My daughter just found some of these in my garage today. She's like, "Oh my God, Papi, look at all these photos." And so, what was your question? I lost track of my thought.
No, like you're doing all. What are you working on now? You're doing all this testing.
Right now. So, so this year I created a blog where I'm gonna do my best to try to share some of the findings that I'm uncovering in all the different things that I'm testing. So, for example, I've gotten big into fasting recently. So fasting is something that I've been doing for a very long time, but for very different reasons. I used to start off every year with a 3-day fast, and it would be a fast not just from food, but just from every comfort that life has to offer, simply to kind of reset myself. And I would take that time to really think through my goals for the year and I kind of plan things out and get myself motivated, and I would come out of it kind of ready to go. But in the last few years, learning a lot more about the tremendous health benefits that come from fasting and how it's kind of interrelated to the ketogenic diet, and listening and reading a lot of the stuff like Rhonda Patrick's been putting out there, I just started to experiment a lot more with like extended fasts. I did my first ever 7-day water only fast last year, felt freaking amazing, and thought, oh, I got to do this every year now. I started off this year with a 7-day water only fast, and this time I actually weight trained through the entire 7 days, whereas the last time I hadn't. So, for example, on my blog, one of the first blog articles that I wrote was, what was the difference between doing a 7-day water-only fast without training versus training? And of course, I'm checking my blood glucose and ketone levels throughout this entire time, and just kind of comparing the differences. So ultimately, like, my goal right now is, how do I find a way to eat all the stuff that I want to eat and still be healthy, fit, and in good shape? And so the best way for me to do that is to be constantly testing macronutrient ratios, checking my metabolic response to those, to those ratios and those foods, and then finding ways to incorporate the things that work for me, and then eliminating things that don't work for me. So I have a lot of unanswered questions about my own body and how my own body responds to foods, exercise, and combining them all. So I'm methodically going through, experimenting, and kind of answering those questions for myself. And I'm going to be sharing those this year. I do it on my IG account. So anyone who's ever come across my IG account, that's been mainly just me posting the foods that I eat, but I'll start to perhaps share a little bit more there. But the blog will be a place where I'll just kind of write stuff out. I track everything on spreadsheets. So I've got lots of neat charts and graphs that kind of show metabolic response to foods over time, and how different things might affect me. So I'll be sharing all that stuff. So I'll look forward to doing that. So that's one thing. Not new, but what is new is the sharing. The other thing is what I meant to do originally when I left Quest. I mean, mind you, I left Quest like super pumped and excited about the space that Quest had created, the changing consumer trends, people starting to become a lot more aware about what they shouldn't be eating, less carbs, less processed foods, more fiber, more protein, more healthy fats. All these things happening are like the perfect conditions to bring the right products to market. And so I sometimes think I wish I would have done it before going to work at No. I'm glad I didn't, because I learned so much with the little over 2 years that I spent there that I'm glad I have those lessons learned now. But now it's time to actually launch a new brand, my own brand. And there's a bunch of products that I've been wanting to bring to market for quite some time. There's things that I've been tinkering with in the kitchen for years that I thought I would maybe one day bring to market, and the time is now. So that is the other big project that I'm working on for 2019, actually launching finally my own brand.
That's incredible, man. I know a lot of people probably have listened through the entire podcast and they're like, this guy's got to come out with something. Like, it's got to be something, because you've been in this industry for longer than most people have even heard about it. And right. You've gone through the trials and tribulations. You're testing, you're doing things the right way, you're figuring things out. And ultimately, I think that's what's needed. I think that's what's needed in the keto space is someone, and just low carb in general, is someone, a brand to come out and go, listen, we're going to do things with metabolic integrity. We're going to make sure we're doing things, not only that we're putting out products, we're educating. So is that what you're looking to do? Is that kind of what this brand is going to be centered around?
Yeah, think about, and I just went downstairs to my kitchen because I'm going to grab a little treat that I'm going to show you. You can see me here still, but I've got it in here. Call me here, send this to voicemail. All right. So yes, first and foremost, like, as you know, going keto means we've got to give up some yummy goodies and foods that we love to eat. And there's things like pizza and ice cream and cookies and stuff that I don't want to go through the rest of my life not getting to eat these yummy things. And so formulating the types of things that we have to give up, but somehow, in spite of having to make them out of protein, fiber, and fat, somehow making them taste amazing and delicious, that's a big, big part of what I want to be able to do. And this, by the way, so talking about tinkering, I don't know if you can see me, I've got the sun coming to my office here, but this is one of the products that I've been tinkering on here, and I cannot wait to actually find a way to commercialize this. But this is like a keto granola bar, and I don't know if you can see this here or not. Right?
Yeah.
I even found a way to coat it with what seems like it's a white chocolate coating, but it actually isn't. It's full fat. And so this thing's like 80% fat. It's got 1 gram net carb. Tastes freaking delicious. So it's like one of the many things that I've been tinkering with that I'd love to bring to market. And selfishly, I just want them available out there so that I can eat them. But in addition to that, you mentioned earlier, there's people who, like, there's kids who are diabetic who can't have a cookie for lunch with the rest of their friends because it'll spike their insulin or whatever. There's people who can have a seizure if they have an insulin spike. So of all the keto products that are entering the market today, I've yet to really come across anything that I think to myself, oh my God, that is so good. This bar is amazing. Like, everything's kind of okay. And then the stuff that's legit keto is mediocre tasting. And then there's some things that are decent tasting that are not very keto, like the ingredients are not great. I mentioned earlier, in fact, I'm in the middle of doing a complete bar review. I gave you a little peek of this the other day, but you can kind of see it a little bit on here. I'm going to review every keto bar that's out there, not just to see whether they taste good or not, but what's the metabolic response to these things, and not just what's the metabolic response, because not related to metabolic response is how it makes my GI feel. And if something has an ingredient like inulin or chicory, I don't even want to test it. I already know what's going to happen. So who cares what the metabolic response is? Right. It's not going to make my stomach feel good. So there's all those things that play into it.
Amazing, man. And so when can people expect to see more? Like, when do you have any time frame of like summer this year? Is it later this year? When might people start to see it?
Heck yeah, this year. The brand, I'll even share it right now, is Heka Foods. It's spelled H-E-K-A. And you can go to hekafoods.com right now and put in your email address and be one of the first people to get a sample of one of the first products. Heka is the Egyptian goddess of healing and magic, and so there's a lot that goes into the types of foods that I want to bring into the market that have to do with healing. I think of the ketogenic diet, by the way, as like a healing diet. Most of the people that approach me with questions want to know, how do I get shredded and veiny and buff, and what's the keto? How can I do keto and get, look like keto, whatever? And my answer typically to them is I look how I look in spite of being keto. Like, keto to me is how I made myself healthy, and now that I'm healthy, I can focus on things like body composition and things like that. That's secondary. So I think of the ketogenic diet as like a healing type of a diet, and so the name Heka has a lot of meaning in that, just because of its roots. So, and it's fun to say, Heka good. Okay. So the timing on this this year, probably sometime in April, May-ish, you'll see the first product become available. But before that, anyone who's interested, like I said, hekafoods.com, or you can find me on IG and let me know. But if you want a sample, try that. And I will take this opportunity to say I'm going to build a team. And one of my favorite things to do in bringing products to market and starting companies is to build those teams. I've had a lot of fun with some amazing people. Some of the people that are going to be a part of this team I've known for many, many years. I hired people at No who I've worked with for over 20 years. And so the team aspect, the team part of it is a big, big, big thing for me. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you have a deep passion for the ketogenic diet, being fit and healthy, and you're pretty freaking good in marketing or product development, social media, or any of those areas, find me. Building a team.
Amazing, brother. I'm super excited for it. I'm going to be one of the first ones to enter in on the email, and we'll post that in the show notes as well, so people can directly find it. Last thing I want to ask you is, where can people find you on social? Like, where can they find you on social, your blog, and then we just talked about hekafoods.com to get first updates. Where can they find you?
First place is my Instagram account, so keto_head. Keto_head. I'm pretty good about responding to every single DM, and I love engaging on there. So if you guys are interested in chatting with me, that's the best place to find me. I created a new website. It's my name, Yemeni Mesa.net. Somebody has my name.com. I don't know why, but I might get it at someday. But anyway, YemeniMesa.net, and I'm going to do a lot more. It's kind of sparse right now. There's a blog on there that you can see and start to see my blog entries. I'll try to do those weekly. And those, by the way, I'm going to evolve into a YouTube vlog channel at some point. So whatever goes into the blog will eventually evolve into a YouTube vlog that I'll be putting out as well. And I'm excited to do that too. But that's not available yet. So the website, YemeniMesa.net, the IG account, and those are the best places.
Amazing. And last question. What are you the most excited about? What's something right now that you're absolutely excited about that you just can't get off your mind, that you're excited to share in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months?
One of the R&D formulators that I'm working with had a breakthrough on one of the products, and I can't say what it is right now, but I can't stop thinking about it because it's delicious. The macros are tight. The ingredients are clean, and it needs to see the light of day. So it's just like, how quickly can I bring this to market? So I'm super excited about that.
Amazing, brother. Well, I know you got a lot going on. You got Heka Foods, and you got a lot to bring to the world. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. We've been waiting to do this for a long, long time, and there's so much value within the last hour that we just talked about, and there's going to be plenty more. So I'm definitely excited for people to see not only Heka Foods, but to follow you on Instagram, follow your blog, and you're just a pioneer and continuing to lead and innovate. So I appreciate everything you do for the community.
Thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to be on here. It's great to be able to chat with you, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Sounds good, brother. We'll talk to you soon.